Good afternoon and welcome back to the NNP Symposium. This is day 3, so I'm assuming most of you in attendance have probably seen one of the earlier presentations as well. Regardless, this hour we are here with Heidi Wastweet to talk about some of her rejected coin and medal designs. So it should be a very different take on the industry than we're all used to hearing about, which I'm very excited about. Reminder for the audience, we will be having a Q&A session at the end. So you can send in questions at any time using that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Just be aware we will not actually be discussing them until the end of the presentation. So that wraps up my intro. Heidi, I'll let you take it away and I'll be back at the end for the Q&A.
Hi, thank you for that nice introduction. Yeah, this is going to be a little different topic. Sometimes we feel like we have to put our best face forward all the time. So I thought it'd be fun to look at the more vulnerable side and talk about things that didn't work out, some things that should have worked out, and some things that should have been, could have been, but weren't. Rejection is an inescapable part of every artist's career, but not just artists, everyone can relate to rejection. So hopefully you can find something in here for yourself too. In preparing for this presentation, I was talking to my colleague and friend Joel Iskowitz, and he summed it up very well. He said, of all the rejections in our career, some of them are well justified and others feel like a crime. And I love that that quote. So I want to start with that. So I've been doing this since 1987, so that's a lot of years and a lot of rejection, and I had just a big pile of things to choose from. So rather than throwing at you randomly, I decided to sort of categorize rejections as a way to organize and show you some of these little gems and atrocities. So the first one I'm going to look at is the in-process rejections. And this is the most common kind because almost every project has these. It's where you're throwing out ideas. Some of them just don't work, but some of them are nice, but they're not the best. So a lot of things just hit the cutting room floor and they never see the light of day. So it's kind of fun to go back and look at the things, and I'll let you be the judge whether you think the best thing was chosen or whether you liked something that actually wasn't chosen and in the process of further development of those designs. So it's going to have a lot of examples of those. And then the second category is going to be competition, where obviously someone else gets the project. So I'm not just getting rejection in favor of something that's ultimately chosen, but it's the project's going to someone else. I don't do a lot of competitions, but it's pretty tough to put all that effort into a competition and not get picked. It's a rough place to be as an artist, but it happens, and so I'm going to show a couple of those. And then some projects get dropped for a myriad of reasons. Something happens with the company, or the client didn't have the funds, something fell through, it was just dropped. And so even after maybe some effort was put in, it just didn't happen, and that's okay. And the next one is quality or taste. And this is where you just cannot please the client no matter what you do. And they throw up their hands like, okay, let's just not do this. And then the next category is going to be timing. So maybe a deadline was missed. And again, that happens as much as we try not to. Sometimes deadlines don't happen, or maybe an opportunity passes. So you'll see some examples of that. The worst kind is the post-production fail. These are things that should have been rejected but weren't. And that's the most embarrassing kind, because it gets out there in the public and you're just, oh no, I wish that hadn't been made at all. And then the third category we're going to look at is third-party rejections. And this is actually something I really enjoy doing. This is when a client comes to me with some artwork that's not working, and they say, can you help us? Can you fix this? I actually enjoy doing that. And so we're going to look at a couple of those, which are things that were rejected previously before they came to me, and then I was able to turn them around. That's really satisfying. So let's start then the first category, which is in process. So these aren't hard rejections. These are just things that didn't make it to the end development of the project. The first one we're going to look at, this is a rather recent one actually, and these are no particular order. I'm not going chronologically. So the assignment was to do a design with a Phrygian cap, which is a symbol of victory, and using the cuneiform word liberty, which on your screen you can see on the left. This is the ancient writing style here, and it's the first use of the word liberty known to history. And then the ancient coin on the right from 40 BC approximately. This was sort of my jumping off inspiration point. So you can, oh, skip one. So I gave my client a lot of choices, and I don't always do this. It really depends on the project. Sometimes I come up with one idea, I know that's the one, and I give the, that one best shot to the client. And sometimes they're like, yeah, that's it, let's go with it. And of course, that's the ultimate right. But sometimes there are so many moving parts, and I give the client a bunch of options. And this was one of those where I gave them a bunch of different varieties, and they rejected all of these, didn't like any of these. But they did like the idea of having a liberty head. Now this liberty head that you see in the layout is just a placeholder. It's not my original drawing. So again, we're playing with layouts and experimenting with using that cuneiform as a texture rather than a straight text, which is a really interesting idea. And so if you see on the screen on the top right hand, that is the one that the client ultimately chose. And then so now I'm going to further develop that. So I'm drawing the head, the liberty head, and my first attempt, which is on the left, is a more modern kind of face in that what we today view as a beautiful face. And then on the right is the one that I developed, which is a little more classic face. And this is what they liked. And it looks like my computer has frozen.
Yes, I believe your camera on our end has frozen as well.
And do you have my audio?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Great, you can hear me, but you can't see me.
Yes. So let's see, are you able to exit out of the Zoom meeting and join back in?
Let me, wow, it's just not letting me do anything.
Okay, I can I believe I can force stop your screen share and share it from my end if we have your most up-to-date PowerPoint, and then we can just do it with the audio.
You don't have the most up-to-date.
Alrighty.
Hey, it's exactly what we were hoping not to happen. Hold on. Let me see if I can.
Thank you to the audience members for bearing with us. We are bound to have a few technical difficulties.
Yeah, and we had such a good start there.
But we'll get it working. It might be the easiest to just turn your computer off and back on.
That might be what we.
If it's not responding at all, you should be able to rejoin using that same link.
All right, so that's what I'm going to do because none of my keys are responding. So I'm going to completely shut down and then bear with me and I'll get back to you as soon as I can.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Let's see. Well, in the meantime, hello, audience members. If anyone has any questions about the NNP Symposium as an event, here's a good time to ask them. So feel free to send those in the Q&A. I cannot ruminate on Heidi's presentation for her, so unfortunately we'll have to wait until she gets back. I'm not sure why it's still showing her as in the meeting. Heidi, you are not still there, correct? She is not still there. So I'm going to remove her, I believe. Oh, nope, I'm not going to remove her. Okay, well, we're gonna make it work. Okay, no questions about the NNP Symposium. So that's cool. There we go, now she got out. Making progress. So let's see. Well, this is the third one that we've done. If you've joined us for any of the other ones, thank you for coming back. When is the next one popped up in here? We have not set a firm date. I would expect sometime in the spring, most likely. After this one, we will have to kind of have a meeting and see if we're going to continue doing them twice a year as we did this year. But if we do, then the spring would be when the next one is kind of on deck. So keep an eye out on the website and social media for when that one will be announced. And we do send an email out to last year's participants when that date is announced. So you all should get an email announcing when it is up, as long as you have been registered for the emails. Eventbrite does give you the option to opt out of them, which I know some people did this year. That just means it's a lot harder for us to communicate with you. So as long as you did not opt out of those, then you will get that information. If you are unsure or concerned about it, just keep an eye on our website, follow us on social media, and it will be announced there as well, and go out in the assorted coin news outlets. Let's see. Okay. Yep, now we have questions about the symposium. Thank you. Okay. Let's see. Okay. There we go. Last year's symposium was fantastic, but I missed a few of the lectures. For those of us like myself who are not familiar with how to use the NNP website, can you give us a link to access those lectures? Yes, so those are actually available on our website. So let me pull that up and I can show you exactly how to get to them with the power of Zoom. Okay, let me pull this back up and share my screen. There we go. Okay, so just go to the NNP Symposium website, symposium.org. There we go. And then up in the top where it says more info, you can go to past recordings. And then we'll have a button for this year added once those are up. And you can click on these to go to that year. So this was the first year of them. And all of the recordings are here. They should be here in approximately the order that they happen during the symposium itself. So if you have the schedule in front of you, it should be very easy to find. And then up here is how you can get to the other years. So the one from earlier this year would be under 2021, and you can scroll down there. I believe the ones from this year will go in the same little bracket. And I think I hear Heidi has rejoined us. Yes, okay. Good deal. Yes.
And we're back.
Yay. So at the very end, I'll come back to some of these questions about the symposium, and we will talk about those. Thank you all for participating and making that a less awkward break.
Thanks for filling in. Right. Oh my gosh. Let's see if this works now. My light's pretty bright too.
We're making it work.
We're making it work. Okay.
There we go. Okay.
And we're going to go with slideshow from that slide. How's that?
Excellent.
Okay, I don't know how long this is going to last, but we're going to have fun until then.
All righty. I'll be here if you need anything.
Thanks. Okay, where I left off, I was talking about these two variations of this design. The drawing on the left was my first attempt at this drawing, but the customer requested that it looked like a more classical type face. So the design on the right is the finished design that was finally approved after all the rejections. And this was the resulting coin, which I think turned out pretty nice. The next example we'll look at, this is the Brook Green medal. For Brook Green Gardens in South Carolina. They do a medal every year. It's a really beautiful series. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this. And this is by invitation. So the assignment was to come up with a design, and you have your choice of 3 different topics. The first topic you can choose is Flora and Fauna of South Carolina. The second is the history of Brook Green Gardens. Or the third is the life of the artist. So I chose the first category, which is Floral and Fauna of South Carolina. And I was drawn to these lovely little night crown, black crowned night herons. Like I mentioned earlier, sometimes I do a lot of different variations of designs and sometimes just one. This is a case where I did a lot of variations. I really wanted to explore how creative I could get with this. So I gave a lot of examples to the committee, and here is not a complete list, but some of my favorites are the ones that I explored. And at this point, they wanted to see a little more of what it was going to look like in 3 dimensions. So I took some of these and I made these are little small 3-inch maquettes out of clay to help work out the ins and outs, since this is pieces very sculpture, it's not graphic like some coins are. I was really playing with the push and pull of the image. And so this is a great chance to work that out before doing it full size. Ultimately, the Brook Green Gardens chose the 2 on the bottom. And so I developed those and polished them up. And this is the resulting coin with all its detail. And this is the approved one. But it's fun to go back and look at those other possibilities because there were some nice things that were happening here. But just didn't see the end of the project. All right, so the next one we're going to look at here, this was the Modern Egyptian series. So this is inspired by Egyptian mythology, but with a little modern spin, my own sort of flavor to it. I didn't want to imitate what the Egyptians were doing in the past, but yet just be heavily inspired by that. So the designs across the top are the development of this design. The one on the far left was my first drawing. And this is, you can see, is a little more of a kind of a dark side of this figure. This is depicting Cleopatra in her final moments. She has the asp around her neck that's come in the basket of figs. You can see it's on the table in front of her. And so she's about to poison herself with the bite of the asp. But the client wasn't feeling this. They wanted something a little more accessible, a little more sexy, fun, contemporary. So I redrew her a little more bombshellish, which is fun too. And then there was some discussion about her costume. So you can see her clothes have changed across those sketches into the final piece. And the final piece has been really popular, and I think it's beautiful. There's also things I liked about the original little sketch too that were lovely. So it's fun to go back and look at that. So you can be the judge of which one you prefer. The next one we're looking at is in the same series. Now in this one, this is Osiris. And at the bottom right too, you can see they're very different from the one that was ultimately chosen, which is the one at the top. Did the reverse with the mummy. The only difference is that I had some of the wrap kind of unraveling. And other than that, it's just a small change. With the obverses that I first came up with, the client was just not feeling it at all. And that happens, and that's okay. And back to the drawing board. And I think in this case, as in many cases, the final product is better, even though initially that rejection is not fun to hear, right? You want the client to always be happy with the first shot out of the gate, but that's not the case. And it really puts me back to the test. And I'm really pleased with the design that we ended up with. And this is another piece in that same series. The first iterations of this design, you can see the head of the crocodile is in a full profile. And then in the final coin you see on the right, he's got more of a 3/4 position, and this gives a little more depth. But I was always fond of the first drawing too. It has its own charm. Let's see what's next. This one is another mythological piece for a different client. This is the mythological succubus. And this was left up to my interpretation. Also, the client was very open, and of course that's the most fun, but the most challenging too, when they say, do whatever you want within this theme. So I chose to depict her as being a heavy burden on her victim, and gave several iterations. And then I always approach these as a partnership with my client. So we go back and forth and discuss this and work on it as a team. So we ended up combining several of these iterations here, and this was the final version here. So you can see, if I go back, the one on the right-hand side is the closest then to the finished piece. But I changed the moon from a full moon to a crescent. It's just more immediately recognizable in the final piece. So that's it's a fun piece. This one's quite old. This is back to 2005. And my first version of this is the one on the left. I had this full school of fish. Now this makes a really nice composition. It's very flowing and has a lot of movement. And I liked this composition, but my client thought that it was too busy for being a small coin. And so we redesigned it, took out that school of fish and just focused on the 3 rays. And I think it turned out really well in the end. It's much more bold and it still has a lot of movement. Okay, so here's our next category, which we're going to talk about composition. So these are things that were just flat out rejected, never got made because they went in a completely different direction. The first one that we'll look at, and I think this was 2007, I was asked to throw in some ideas for the ANA Presidential Award. My idea was to do some mock-ups, some mashups, sorry, of some classic coins and how they kind of flow into one another. But that was not ringing anybody's bell. And what they ended up with was a very lovely and classical design by Joel Iskowitz. And this is fun because it's a small industry. A lot of us designers just know each other. We're friends, we're colleagues. And so as much as it is painful to not win the competition, it is fun to see your friend win. And it's a lovely design. The next competition, this was another competition by invitation in 2012 for the ANA convention in Philadelphia. My idea here was to talk about the Jefferson Peace Dollar, which famously traveled with Lewis and Clark on their expeditions, and they used them in trading with the Native Americans that they met along the way. And a lot of them went on to wear them. They turned them into necklaces and wore them with pride. And so I chose to tell a story from the front and the back of the coin with the U.S. Mint Director at the time, Elias Boudinot. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. And he was the Mint Director at the time that this was developed. So on his lap is the drawing of the metal that he's helping to plan. And then on the reverse of the coin is where those metals ended up. But this design was not chosen. And I'm going to show what was chosen. And this again went to another friend, Jamie Frankie. So I'm always happy to see this go to a friend. And it's a lovely design with lots of depth. And this is another Mint Director, David Rittenhouse. So we had similar ideas. And that happens a lot too, where I've talked to other designers after the fact on a project and find out that we had some very similar designs that we were completely independent of. So what's next? Okay, so the next category is those that were just completely dropped. There was no other artist that was chosen. The project just didn't happen. So this one was for the American Institute of Architects. They were looking to redesign their metal. And it was this was an open competition, and I used a previous sculpture that I'd made, which you see on the right-hand side, and I reconfigured it to be a metal. And I think it worked really well for metal. And I thought this was really answering the request. But in the end, they decided to not update their metal. And what they did was here's what that would look like on a ribbon. What they ended up doing was they kept their classic metal, which was by Weinman. Now, if you're going to lose a contest, lose it to Weinman. It's a beautiful metal. But you know, it's fun now to have the opportunity to show this design because it was a nice design also. Okay, the next one of this one on the left, this was for an aquarium. They had thought about doing a metal, which they ultimately just decided not to do for whatever reason. But what's great about this is I was able to reuse the design later. I took that same lionfish and incorporated it into a different metal. So recycling works in art too. Okay, the next category is quality or taste, where I just could not please the client. And so this one, obviously Bob Marley portrait, I was dealing here with the family. So there's a lot of emotions involved when doing a portrait of a deceased person and you're communicating with their family. And they loved this photo of him that you see on the left. And I love it too. It's a wonderful photo, but it's not a good candidate for a coin. And I could not talk them out of using it. They were just dead set on using that photo for this coin. And I said, okay, I'll try. I'll give it my best shot to see if I can make it work as a coin sculpt. And I really did give it everything I have, but in the end, it didn't look good. And the family wasn't pleased, and they didn't go with another artist. They just dropped the whole idea. We're not making a coin at all. Next category is timing. So this is an example of where timing got in the way, and this is a great one. My subject did not get elected. So when there's a presidential election, some of you know this, some of you may not, the inauguration medals are made ahead of time. So once the election happens and we know who has been selected, then we already have that medal ready to go. And so I was assigned John Kerry, and we completely developed that medal, but of course he didn't get elected. So there were only a small handful of these sample medals that were struck ahead of time and ultimately not produced for obvious reasons, but it's fun to go back and look at that. So this one is an odd project. The assignment was the mythological character of the goddess Nui, who is a creator character. So she took clay from the earth and she sculpted humans from it. And it's a fun subject. She's like a woman on top and a serpent on the bottom. And I came up with this design where she's populating the earth with her sculptures. And of course, I can relate to this because I'm a female sculptor. She's a female sculptor. What a great subject. And I do like the design. On her robe is water, which is what is mixed with earth to make clay. And on the right-hand side is a sprig of blossoms, which is represents fertility and creation in the spring. But this project, it just didn't happen, and mostly it was my fault. I did not have a rapport with my client. There was several instances of miscommunication where they approved one idea and then later changed their mind, and then I wasn't sure what they wanted, and there was just a real lack of communication, and I had lots of other projects that I was working on, and ultimately I just kind of dropped it and never finished it. It's a design that I really like. Maybe one day it'll see life again, but for now it just lives on the shelf and in this presentation. This next design, this was a missed deadline. So I had been asked to design this piece, but I think I was out of town. I can't remember, it's been a while now. But I do remember that I just missed the deadline. That happens. And so they went with another artist. And here was the design that I had done on the right. And then on the left is what they had made. Okay, so here's the most embarrassing category. We're going to look at some stinkers now. These are the post-production fails, things that should have been rejected that weren't. So this project, this is called the Maui dollar. I've done, I forget how many years of this. It's a long series, and most of these are really great designs. But this year I was looking back, I was never happy with this design. The request had a lot of things in it. The birds, the whale, the hula dancer are all in one space. It's a lot going on in the sun. My first version on the left was the hula dancer in a very upright position, but my client really wanted this other position where the dancer is leaning a little bit forward But in the shallow context of a coin, when you have that just slight lean, she just looks short and weird. And as best as I tried, it never really turned out. You can be the judge if you like this one or not, but it's certainly not my favorite. And when I get interviewed, almost every time people ask me, what's your favorite design? Which is impossible to pick just one favorite. And it's impossible to pick what's the worst, but this is definitely not one that I'm proud of. Here are some more atrocities. And I beat the drum a lot about this very thing. And here's some examples. When you have a muzzled animal on a coin, the worst thing you can do is has them pointing straight forward. And you can see the photo on the right. It's a lovely photo of a lovely deer. And there's nothing wrong with this, but when you try to compress that into a coin with no color, you can see how weird these guys look. So the one on the top right, I think, is the worst. It doesn't even look like a deer. But the reason that I wasn't able to adjust these is because this series, it's based on a painting that won a contest. So there's no changing the painting. The painting is what it is, but the painting was not done with a coin in mind. And sometimes these two things just don't jive. So you can see, I think the one on the top right is the worst example. And then the bottom right with the head turned just a little bit solves a lot of that problem. And all four of these were actually made into coins, but I don't have any of the physical examples. I just have these photos of the plasters. And here I think is a good candidate for the ugliest coin I've ever done. Again, this circumstance, it's a painting that has been chosen for the annual duck stamp in California. These birds are flying forward, but in the sculpture on the coin, they just look like, you know, a Thanksgiving turkey that's flown off the table. It's very strange with the heads coming forward like that. Is never a good idea. And it got made. I'm sorry if you own one of these. These are terrible. Okay, the third category. So we're going to look at some rejections that were other artists' designs that were rejected and came to me. This one is for Greenland for a 20 kroner. And again, we have some of those muzzled animals coming straight forward. And this time I was able to tell my client, please, can I redesign this? This is not going to look good on a coin. And they trusted me and they let me redesign it. So the one on the right is the redesign, which I think turned out really nice. I like this composition and one of my favorite coins. And this one, this is actually, I think, a really good design, but it had a lot of anatomical problems with the horse, the feet. If you look at the horse's left front foot, there's actually an extra joint going on that has two knees, and it looks like two knees. And so I had a good time dialing in the anatomy, and the client requested I put some water along the bottom, and it turned out really nice. And they made this for several years in a row. This was the first year in 2013. Here's the final coin. Now, the last category that's kind of in that third party fail I want to talk about is the counterfeits. So, and all the ones that I've seen of my medals are all coming out of China, and people ask me, can't you do anything about it? Not really. It's like, you know, whack-a-mole, you can't stop them. And so I do want to get the message out there. If you see these fakes, you can obviously see the quality difference. If you compare the original to the fakes, there's a big quality difference. They're much flatter and much lower quality. So if you see these, please don't buy them. That's the only thing we can do to combat these, is just don't buy those fakes. All right, so that is the end, and with our little technical hiccup, that wasn't too bad. And I'm open for any questions.
Alrighty, I'm going to have you go ahead and stop the screen share. So there's a red button at the top that says stop share. Excellent. And then audience members, go ahead and send in questions for Heidi to the Q&A, and I'll revisit some of those that were about the symposium at the end, but that'll be the last thing we do. So how did you get into this career?
By accident, like all good things. I was only 18, so I knew I wanted to be an artist, but I didn't know anything about coins. And there was a job opening at Sunshine Mint in Idaho where I lived. I took in my portfolio, and the man hiring was Don Dow. And not many people remember him. He did a lot of coins back in the 80s, and he thought that I looked like somebody he could train and took me on. I had no idea what I was getting into. I thought I'll do this for a few years, and here we are 30 some years later, still doing it. It was it destiny? I don't know, or just an accident.
How is the US Mint to work with?
The US Mint is actually really great to work with. I've dealt with them on 2 different levels. I was on the CCAC for 8 years, and now I'm on the AIP program, which is the designer contractors, and it's been a really pleasurable experience. I wasn't sure how that transition was going to go from the critic to the artist, the designer, but it's been really good.
Ready? What US coins have you had a hand in designing that you can share, of course?
Yeah, there's not much I can share at this point. The one that's out there is the silver law enforcement commemorative reverse. It has a magnifying glass and an eye and a fingerprint in it. Some of you have seen it. That's the only one that's been out so far. And I can't yet show, maybe someday I'll be able to put together this kind of presentation with all the rejects specifically from the US Mint. I think that would be fun, but that'll be when I'm like done with my contracts and everything.
Right.
Top secret.
That's it. We have someone in the audience who does have your Osiris and Cleopatra coins.
Oh, yay.
Thought I'd pass that along. What is the fastest timeline to completion for a project, and also the longest?
Oh, that's a good question. It's been a while since I had a real rush job. I remember years ago, I turned one around in I think a day and a half. That was a marathon. And then I've had, not that long ago, actually, for the Metal Collectors of America medal, the theme was Raven Steals the Sun, and they were so patient with me. I wanted to do a really good job, and the ideas just weren't coming, and I was sketching and not coming up with anything I liked. And I think it was a full year from the time that they asked me until the final production of the medal. Once the idea finally came to me, then things happened really rapidly, and it came together. But kudos to them for giving me the space to do that, because I think the end product really shows.
Let's see. Do you engrave all of your designs by hand, or are some done entirely digitally?
I am still a holdout for only hand sculpting. I haven't done any digital sculpting. I do, of course, incorporate a lot of technology into what I do, like today, presenting digitally. I do digital drawing. I do layouts digitally, digital photography, of course, communicating digitally. So those are very important tools. But that last final step of the sculpting, I still do by hand with clay and plaster. I see some really great things that are done with digital sculpting, but I still have a preference for the handwork. It just has an organic feel that has not been replaced by digital. And I don't think digital is a replacement for clay and plaster. I just think it's an additional tool in the tool belt.
See, regarding the duck stamp issue, the legend on the obverse came across to me as California, DU. Was the word duck presumably cut off on purpose, or was it an error, or possibly the acronym for Ducks Unlimited?
See, that's another reason why that design is a fail, because that's not apparent. It is an abbreviation of Ducks Unlimited, but the fact that someone said, is that supposed to say duck? That's just pointing out another way that that design is a complete fail.
I was wondering that one myself as well when it came by. What happened to the rest of the word?
Great observation.
How do you do lettering by hand on your coins and medals?
Lettering is actually pretty easy. It looks difficult, and for beginners, when I'm training sculptors, that's the most intimidating part. They think, I can't do that. That looks really hard. And then I say, I guarantee in a couple months, you're going to tell me that's the easy part. And without fail, they do. It's sculpted in the reverse. That makes it stand up in the positive. So I'm just simply cutting in a series of straight lines this way, that way, some serifs. It's really not as hard as it looks. It takes patience. I'll put a movie on in the background while I'm doing that so that I can get really tedious and patient with it. And it's not that bad.
Alrighty.
Of course, today, a lot of digital work is done with the lettering. So sometimes clients will ask me to only sculpt the image, and then they will digitally engrave the lettering. And then some people still prefer the hand look of the lettering, because there's a non-congruous look to when you have engraved letters and a sculpted image.
Yeah. Do you produce the production die? Or if not, and you submit the approved design to someone like the Mint, have their in-house engravers ever touched up your work?
There's all varieties in this aspect. When I started out and I was working at Sunshine Mint, because I was a full-time employee of the Mint, not a contractor, I did all aspects. I did the designing, the sculpting, I did the die engraving, I did packaging and bulk inventory, I did die polishing. I worked with the press operators. The only thing I didn't do is I didn't go in the melt room and physically melt the billets of silver. So that was a great education, and I did all of those different aspects within the Mint. So then after I left the Mint and became an independent contractor, then my clients are a variety of different mints. So they have their own facilities that do the engraving. I do the designing, I do the sculpting, and then I send them the model, which is a plaster, and it's usually around an 8-inch diameter plaster, and that goes to the Mint, and then they scan the plaster. They can do that one of two ways: digitally, the new method, which is a laser light that scans that and digitizes it, or an old pantograph machine that physically traces it, and that cuts it into the die, and then they use the die to strike the coin. So that's a very typical method of going about it. And then rare occasions I'll do a design and then someone else will digitally sculpt it. But that's very rare. I hardly ever do that. Specifically when I'm doing work with the US Mint, they have their own in-house engravers. So I'm only doing designing. I'm submitting a drawing, and if it's chosen, then it goes to their in-house engravers who handle all of that. So I have no hand in the sculpting of that. So I think that covers, did that cover the question?
I believe so, yeah.
So I don't do any of the engraving here myself, though. As an independent, I don't cut any dies. And so if I have a client that comes to me that's not a Mint, if it's just an individual, then I will refer them to a Mint to do the die engraving part of that.
And the person who asked it would like to confirm that that did indeed answer it satisfactorily.
Okay, thanks. And then some, more than you wanted to know. Shut up.
Do you put a template over the clay to do engraved letters? I think we already touched on that some, but.
Yeah, that's just a further detail of that. So what I do is like I was saying earlier, I do incorporate technology. So it's much faster to type out, especially when you're configuring text around a circle. It's much faster to do that layout in a program. I use Adobe Illustrator, and it's easy to make changes. And then I print that out, and I can trace that then on a piece of tracing paper, and I transfer that tracing paper to my plaster, and then I hand carve from there. Sometimes I'll hand draw the letters and then transfer them to the plaster, but in most cases I'm using existing fonts, and that works just fine. It takes a little more time and effort to create my own fonts and to draw hand-drawn letters. And that's, it's a great way to go though. And not many people are doing that anymore. It's kind of old fashioned, but I like to do that too. So in short, yes, I do create a template. It's not like a tracing. It's not like a cutout template. Some people in the past have used like little glue on letters. That never looks right. So I just make a handmade template and then hand carve the letters from there.
We have someone in the audience saying, I collect stamps on coins. So if the California DU piece is indeed based on a stamp, it would be a prime candidate for my collection. Might you have any left, or do you know where I could obtain one?
I don't even have one. And I did a search just today. You know, more and more things come up on the internet. When I made that, that was 2006, I think. Yeah, 2006. It wasn't available online. I didn't get a copy of it, but every once in a while I'll go search for an old coin and someone has posted it maybe in an auction or something. And sometimes I've never even seen them before. So that particular one, I actually don't know much about it as a stamp because I don't know that it's like a postage stamp. It's like a Fish and Game stamp. So it's slightly different. And maybe it was in conjunction also with the post office. I'm not sure. I did some projects that were actual stamps with the scalloped edge and everything, and they were struck as a square. That was back in the 90s, and I don't have any of those either. I've done probably over 1,000 different projects over my career, and some of them come and go so fast. I barely remember them.
I understand that.
It's a blur.
Do you ever work on designs
Great
for
question.
yourself or for your own productions?
Yes, I do. So when it comes to, there's two basic kinds of coins. There are cast coins and struck coins. And when I say coins, I am incorporating coins and metals as one word. So most of my commissions are for struck coins because it's very cost efficient. If you're doing a volume, if you're doing 100 or 60,000, it's very cost efficient to use dies and strike coins, especially if you're doing silver bullion. But as an individual, if you're just doing a small handful of art metals, it's cost prohibitive to then spend the money to have dies cut and struck. There's setup fees with the mint. So there's a lot of overhead to get started. So when I'm doing the art metals for myself and not thinking too hard about the marketability, but thinking more about the art, then I tend to go with cast. It's much less expensive. I don't have to make many. I can feel free to be very experimental. And if you go to my website, wastweetstudio.com, you can see examples of those studio metals that I've done for myself that are not commissions and more on the artistic experimental side.
All right. Can you comment on modernism versus classicism that clients like on modern metals and coins?
That's a big subject. I could talk for an hour about that. I am a big proponent of quote unquote modern metals, but when someone says modern, one person hears modern and thinks one thing, and another person hears modern and thinks another. So modern is such a broad word. Contemporary is another word that I use. And as far as classic metals, you have classic like the 1800s. You also have classic like the ancient Greek. So that's also a very big, broad term, classic. And then you have neoclassical, which is modern coins that try to look like old coins. And there's still a call for that. People really like the old, beautiful, allegorical female figure in flowing robes. Who doesn't love that, right? They're beautiful. I don't try to do a lot of that because I don't think I can do it better than it's already been done. I love those old pieces. They're so gorgeous. You know, the Weinmans and the St. Gaudens and stuff. They're so gorgeous. But what have I got to add to that? I want to do my own thing. I want to find my own voice and my own take on things. and talk about where we are today and how we view beauty today is different. Those old coins, especially like if you look at the jawline of the peace dollar, she has a much more rounded jaw, and we don't see that, say, in today's fashion photos. So our ideas today of beauty are much different, and they're changing. We have a lot more body acceptance today than we had even 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Our society is recognizing beauty is of all shapes and forms, and not just one, twiggy from the 60s. At one time, everyone wanted to look the same. Now we have a lot more variety, and I think that's wonderful. And I try to speak to that. Sometimes I do. Of course, I'm always influenced by those classical pieces, but I'm continually trying to find my own space in today's design world.
What recommendations would you have for someone looking to get into a similar field?
It's easy and difficult at the same time to get into this field. It's easy because there's not a lot of competition. There's not a lot of us. It's a very small niche field. And for the most part, those of us who are in it are very welcoming to newcomers. I'm president of the American Medallic Sculptor Association, and so I head up as much as I can all of the medalists in this country to band together to support each other and inform each other and to further the art. And we're very welcoming to new people. On the other hand, it's difficult because there are no classes, there are no books, and that makes it intimidating to get into it. I do teach a workshop every year at Brook Green Gardens, so that's a great way to get some one-on-one instruction. My mentor, Eugene Daub, teaches often, and he's a wonderful teacher, so that's a great resource. So becoming involved in the AMSA, taking these little workshops is a great way. And then just reaching out to those of us who are already in it and ask questions and say, how do I get started? And be brave.
All righty. Okay, I think that was the last one we have in here for Heidi. So you're welcome to send in other questions. Otherwise, we do have a few left about the symposium from my time filler earlier in the session.
Good.
So let's see, Heidi, do you want to go ahead and head out, or do you want to stick around to hear about them, I guess?
Yeah, I'll listen to your questions, yeah.
Alrighty, let's see. One person, would it be possible to have individual links to presentations that can be added to Google Calendar for future events? For those of us in other countries, keeping track of the time zones can be quite tricky. We're aware that the time zones cause a little bit of a problem, and that's definitely something that we are looking to find more ways to make it clear to people in the future.
And those of us in this country still have a time zone problem. Yeah.
It has been suggested, and we're considering on the actual PDF schedule to list the different time zones that are at least in the US on that, so that you don't have to keep doing the calculations yourself. So we might be implementing that next year. As far as making them addable to Google Calendar, I will make a note of that and see if we can get that taken care of. Let's see. And then there's a suggestion to add an index on the main recording page to show the sessions from past symposia for those that don't have the schedules handy. And that's a fantastic suggestion, which I will be working on. Thank you for putting that out there. Let's see, and then there are two in here from another presenter, and to that person, please email me with those questions and I will get you much more thorough answers or comments on those things. Okay, and then we have one back in here for Heidi, which is mainly why I asked you to stick around. I figured more might come through. I see a square coin on your website dated 2008 with some breed of cat on it. Can you tell me more about that piece?
That was a leopard, I think, for Darfur. It's a legal tender coin, but I don't think it actually circulated. I think it was just a collector coin, but it is a regular legal tender coin in that country. And that was quite a while ago, but it was a fun series to do. I don't have a lot more. That wasn't very thorough, was it? I don't know.
With some information. Okay, then I think that's about all we have in here. There was a suggestion for the symposium to take a vote of who wants 1 or 2 per year. We do usually send out a survey after it's concluded, which we should be doing this year again as well. And so that will likely be one of the questions included on that survey. So keep an eye out and give us your feedback. Okay, and I don't see anything else coming in. So if you have any final questions for Heidi, get those in promptly. Otherwise, we are going to wrap it up. Thank you very much, Heidi, for a very interesting presentation. It's certainly an aspect of the industry that I have never heard from. And so I was very excited to kind of get a look behind the curtain for a change.
And it was fun for me to get some of those designs out and get some eyes on them, because it's kind of a shame that when you spend a lot of time on a design and they just go, falls on the floor. So that's fun. And if anybody has any questions later, they can email me too.
Yes, and if you can't find her email easily, feel free to just use that contact form on the symposium website. Let us know who you're trying to contact and we'll forward it directly to her. So that's an easy way, and that goes for any of the presenters. If you need to contact them, that is the way to do it. And then it is up to them if they are able to respond. So feel free to contact them that way. And okay, I believe that's going to wrap us up. I don't see anything new for Heidi.
All right, thank you.
So, Heidi, thank you very much. And thank you for these symposium suggestions. We'll be taking some of those into consideration. In the meantime, the next session starts at 4. We've got Devin Kane talking about some world coins. I believe that is our only world coin presentation this year. So be sure you tune into that one as well. And have a good afternoon.